Okay.
Okay. Well, we are here with our guest, Rubén Zamora. And once again, Dr. Zamora is he's a diplomat. He has served in Washington for the government of El Salvador and representing the government of El Salvador towards both the United States and the United Nations. Dr. Zamora is also a political analyst and writes a great deal about the current politics of El Salvador. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to talk about both international relations, relationships between El Salvador and the United States, between El Salvador and the world community, maybe between the United States and Latin America, but also about the politics of El Salvador right now, because it's been in the news a lot. Those who've been taking my class and just follow the news know there's been a lot of talk about the current administration, President Nayib Bukele, and his crackdown on the gangs, his flirtation with cryptocurrency, with Bitcoin, his sometimes contentious relationships with the current administration of U.S. administration, President Biden. And so I think there's a lot to talk about. Maybe I would like to, well, we have some questions that we got in advance for Dr. Zamora. Dr. Zamora, do you still have those questions, or I can read them to you, or I can have our students read them to you?
I have it now.
Okay, so
because you sent it to me before.
Yeah, I did send it to you before. But would you, before we go to the questions, would you like to open with any statement, any assessment of current events, either in El Salvador or between El Salvador and the United States?
Yes. Okay. Right now?
Yes, right now.
Okay. Hello to everybody that is at this in this meeting, especially my friends Salvadorians, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Then let me tell you two little things. First, El Salvador is as a republic now 2 centuries. Among those centuries, at the political level, the dominant factor or the dominant force was violence. In the 19th century, because there was the soldiers that became colonels one day and generals and took the power. Last, in the 20th century, the armed forces of El Salvador for 60 years controlled the government. And all those things created at the end of the 79, last in 1979, produced a serious crisis of the militarist mode to hold power. They say that they have accepted the Constitution and are the defenders of the Constitution. But the attitude from them was against the people very strongly and growing in that sense. To become at the moment of a crisis, and then a war, a civil war, started in El Salvador. That lasted for 12 years. Until the end of the last century, that both sides realized that they could go on, the government and the guerrilla, go for years and years and decades without any result, and started to think about the alternative for a negotiation process to stop the war and start to have peace in the country. That's why for 2 years they went discussing, not only to stop the war, the killing to each other, but going into the root of the problems, at least at the political level, and introduce changes in order to establish the possibility for peace in the country. That means certain changes in our constitution. And then at the end, that was very good, right? And we started to have peace in the term of the guerrillas against the army of El Salvador. The guerrilla became a political party, and then there was a lot of changes at the constitution of the executive, creating new institutions to defend the human right that was seriously violated in the whole years period, right? That, and in the other hand, something more for the civil society to have part of the political democracy, and changes, important changes into the electoral apparatus that before everybody knew that it was always something wrong, that they put a lot of votes for the government party, even with all the elections, right? But then it started to have a different, a more serious, a more clean process of election, and more open to all the different opinions in the country. That was all explicitly contributed, written in the peace agreement that was founded at the beginning of the last decade of the last decade. Then the last years has been that it was an open. But because the peace agreement, what they did was to open the door for democracy. And then El Salvador started to have a democratic structures and actions. There was the army sent to the headquarters. Political parties started to be without any problems, right? And being respected. And in that sense, the elections started to be the most important instrument that civil society has to keep the democracy in the country. But at the same time, there was some important part of the political apparatus that the agreement didn't touch. And there was a fundamental problem that the agreement did not touch the root of the problem that was basically at the social and economic part of the society. Right? And concentrated on what they could do it at that time, right? In changes at the politicals. In that sense, something that was the past, some institution that operated as in the period, all period, continue without change. And basically, two of the most important for democracy, the political parties, that all of them were children of the war, right, the civil war, then was not touched by the peace agreement. And secondly, the National Assembly, Congress, that is a key actor for keeping democracy and respect for the law and respect for. And only the judicial organ was touched a little bit, but this other no. And therefore, during these last 30 years, politics in El Salvador had been the contradictions between the old system and the new system. And that is why in El Salvador started to develop a very serious, and I will say the big crisis, political crisis of probably after the war, because the war is the more difficult, the biggest of the political crisis, right? But then started. Political parties started to lose very rapidly the confidence of the people. Second, others part of the peace agreement was not completed, only started, but not really completed. Right. And that started to be a big problem that at the same time that we were with the peace agreement opening the door for a democratic society, at the economical level was the party that came to the government in a free election, right? Was with the banner of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is the most, one of the things that is more in the other side than of democracy that we can say, especially in countries in which the development of democracy is not very strong. In that sense, for instance, El Salvador started to become more seriously structured around democracy. Compared with Europe, with the United States, we were like something like in the 200 years before, right? That is what the situation. But at the same time, people started to learn because the old media started to be free. Before they were not free, right? They were controlled by the government. Right? And then now started to be everything, and people started to know more and new ways of communicating politics to the people. I mean, electronically started to appear in the country. And then what we have at the end of the 2025 started to be very clearly that we have a contradiction very serious. And that was the oasis of a new serious crisis that we now have. Political parties has started to go less and less in terms of people. Many people abandon the political parties. Right? And then something has to fill up this vacuum of politics. And this is the appearance of populists, neo-populists in El Salvador with the President Bukele government. But basically, what they have been doing in this for years, I mean, next year they finish the period, is to try to dismantle first the separation of the three fundamental organs of democracy: legislative, executive, and judicial. And they were, the president, Bukele, was able to control the legislative and the executive. To the extent that last week, the leader of the police, the civilian police that becomes from the peace agreement, that new kind of police, that was put a tweet in the Twitter saying that the president Bukele has been able to contain under his hand all the three most important or fundamental: the judiciary, the executive. The executive is the one that is him, but the other two. And that started half an hour in the Twitter, and then it was get out. But we couldn't read it, and we couldn't have a photograph of that. But that creates how even the high level now believe that we do not respect the Constitution and create a very, very strong executive that practically now is ruling the whole of the country without any control. And clearly is the most obscure in terms of explaining to the people what they are doing is this government. Except to say, for example, when they leave and give some bags with some food to the people. This is the bigger, when they arrange a road is another big thing. And then the connection of a leader that is Bukele, that is very, very authoritarian, with what all the new means that exist for communication, social and political communication, in this case, yeah, that is the big change in terms of the political communication in the history of the humanity. Yes? There are only four moments in which that change has been produced in the history. Yes, now with the intelligence and all these new things that exist, that they started to introduce into the politics of El Salvador, who is the most, I will say, the most big in terms of the population, comparing with other bigger, but in terms of the 6.5 million in El Salvador, the biggest is a structure of sending constantly political reports about what good thing is El Salvador. And the government now is saying that El Salvador is the most secure country. But at the same time, the president said that now the people who have been put into jail in the last year is more than 67,000 people, children, women, and mostly men. Right? This sort of thing is what now has been injected in the last 3 years or 4 years into our society. And that's why now that we are facing a new phase, that is the new government, the new election of the presidency in February next year, yeah, is that the president Bukele has said that he is going to be the candidate of the opposition party, or the party, his party, that is the governmental party, right? When the Constitution of El Salvador 6 times is the only thing 6 times that repeat that this is forbidden. But not only that, the Constitution is clear to say that if somebody tries to do, they continue to govern, supporting the president that want to continue immediately in the presidency, no matter if it go or not in the election. In both cases, the Constitution says that those persons lost their citizenship. And it's very sad to have somebody that is in the presidency, but that no longer, according to the Constitution, is a citizen. But secondly, the Constitution, in the only part that talking about the non-re-election, one of the 6 prohibitions about that, in one of that say that if the government, the president, try to continue immediately for another period, the people is under the order of the Constitution to start to react against the government. In that sense, then, what they are doing now is trying to go very back to the previous period. Not respect for human rights, not respect for the Constitution, and on the contrary, try to fill everything with just telling that they are doing this and this and this and this and this. And sometimes, or many times, are not true. Okay. I don't know.
Dr. Zamora, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to give a little bit of time for questions. And to our guests, to our attendees, I understand that, you know, we said the ending time would be 10:45. If anyone wants to stay a little bit longer, we want to respect our guests' time, but maybe we can have a couple more minutes for questions. I did see in the chat, Lily Nawson had a question. I'm going to allow you, Lily, to talk so you can be able to ask the question directly. So you should be able to unmute yourself and then ask Dr. Zamora your question. You want to go ahead?
Hi, I was just wondering how liberation theology influenced your early political work and your political ideology.
Yeah. So your name is Lily Nawson, isn't it? Okay, Lily, thank you for your question. Well, I think that I was born in a very Catholic, decent society in a small country, in my country, right? In that sense, then I was educated in the traditional way of the Catholic, the inferno and all those things, you know. But then when we was sort of 17 years old, started the whole the Vatican, Second Vatican, and the change, and especially started to develop of liberation theology here in Latin America. And some part of Germany, there was some theologian started working on that. That's Spain as well. In that sense, then, for us was a big change. That means I started to have politics ideas, politics intention, when was being born, started to born and develop this liberation theology. That means I was educated by them. Right? And then Father Yacuria was my friends for years, you know, the bishop, Monsignor Romero, that Monsignor Romero never say that he was of the liberal theology. He was practicing, because the basic of the whole thing is to say that a Christians is for the poor, for the people who suffer. And this is maybe text of the Evangelium, Jesus started to tell the people what to do, bienaventuranzas. It's in English, I don't know in English what it is, right? In that sense, I started to work inside the action organization, and in that sense, we were probably continue to become Catholic, because the Christians, not only Catholic, Christian, because the liberation of theology and start for me is a very important and definitely step that you could start to understand your religion on the life of that kind of theology.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much for that question, Lily. If anyone else has questions, you can post in the Q&A, or you can simply raise your hand, and I will, just permit you to talk. But you do need to ask, because you're automatically muted until I allow you to ask directly. So earlier on, some of you from my class had asked questions of the ambassador. Brittany, Mateo, Cindy, Kelly, you had some questions if anyone's willing to. Oh, here we go. Natasha, let me unmute you, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, go ahead, Natasha.
Hello. How do you think Bukele will go about changing the constitution in order to run for re-election?
Well, why he's doing, probably he could tell you more clearly. Because the only thing that he says when he announced that it was the 15th September last year, the day of the independence, the speech, and then in that speech he said I am going to be a candidate for the next president. Okay. Why that? I think that when you look at that, it's very difficult to say what are the, or could be. Because he says at that moment, in that moment, he said, I have consulted to my wife and my child, and it's something like 1 year or 1.5 years old, yeah, about to continue in the presidency. He says that. I mean, he party didn't do. He party that in his party that he was going to do that. Right. But anyway, in that, the problem is that Bukele, politically speaking, not only is trying to destroy whatever political party of opposition appears, and he's been doing it very strongly, even putting into crimes, accusing of crimes, are very important members of the opposition in the previous period, right? Okay. In that sense, that was what he is trying to do. But he has destroyed his own party at the same time. Right. And now he's proposing, for instance, something that is absolutely crazy, but he's proposing that El Salvador, that has 2,270 something authorities, local authorities in El Salvador, then to reduce that number to 50. And the only explanation is that it's easier to deal with 50 than with 2,700. And that has created inside his own party a lot of problems. Of course, because for this is something like to reduce the number to 1 for every 5 that before existed, That means one candidate for mayor and group of the people who go with him, and 4 more out if they go to the election. And then there is a big problem. The other thing that he decided, he said that, okay, let's go from 84 members of Congress, right, to 51. And some of them say to 40, but no way. Yeah. But then the majority in Congress is from his own party. And then all the now what the deputy started to say, will be for me, to no poder re-elect, because in El Salvador, like in the United States, congressperson could re-elect indefinitely. Okay? Then all those things have started. And that's 2 serious changes and bad changes because are done without any serious reasons, political, without asking a single mayor and members of the local authority what they think about this idea to disappear 5 or 4 out of 5 each in the country. Without that, then they have been able, they say that they were going to send that to the assembly because the president only sent to the National Assembly, Congress. Now, they say in the morning, okay, look, here is this law, pass it. And then, without going to the commissions, the same day is approved by the majority because he's the president. Because the president of the republic says it has to be good. That is the only response that sometimes you repeat from some of the members of Congress or the official part. Yeah. All those things has not been able to enter. And I doubt now, because now the situation is changing. Yesterday, let me tell you that, we have had the biggest popular movement of, I would say, during all the Mr. Bukele regime. Yeah? Thousands of me, thousands of people, more than in the first one that was for the day of the independence. That was the first big manifestation against the government. And now I think either was more or less the same number or a little bit more this time. And with a very important thing that you have to understand, usual society organization and trade unions don't look very well together. And they are not fighting each other, but they like do not mix very easily. In the United States, I know that this is a little difficult, right? But here, that has been the tradition. But now, because it was the day for the working in all the world, except the United States, of course. Right? The 1st of May, in that day was the demonstration on the street, on the road, you know, and there was organized for unity of organization of civil society and trade unions. And even at the end of the end, that somebody made 2 or 3 speeches, you know, you have to say to the people, oh, it is that was no organization of the civil society was going to speak, only the workers. Very interesting that happened in El Salvador yesterday. I thought it's a respect of something is moving. Okay.
Now, I know we're at the end of our scheduled time. Dr. Zamora, are you free to leave, to stay for a few more minutes?
Well, yes, I could.
Okay.
Because I like very much to try to talk.
Okay.
Explain
Excellent.
what's happening in the country.
Well, maybe we'll take another couple questions. Madeline, I see you have a question. Madeline, would you like to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Yes, hola, mi nombre es Madeline y soy de El Salvador. So, mucho gusto, doctor. Y la pregunta que le quería hacer es, ¿cuánto tiempo cree que el presidente Bukele va a extender la ley de excepción? ¿Y qué cree que es el plan de los que tiene arrestado ahorita? Porque ahorita lo que yo sé es que no están haciendo los juicios para los que están arrestados. Solo quería saber qué usted piensa que es el plan.
Okay. Shall I contest in
Yeah. If you could do it in English, I'll just mention Madeline's question was about the state of exception, the current state under which the government of El Salvador is arresting 60,000 plus people accused of gang affiliation.
First, the first question is nobody knows how long, because what Bukele has said is that he is going to have this special in which they do whatever they want, and they have been doing quite a lot of something against the Constitution. But for the moment, nobody knows. Because he said that he is going to go against, because it's a war that he has declared against the gangs, you see, the maras. And he said, until I finish with all of them, I am not going to stop that. And what has to say, yes, continue 1 month more according to the Constitution is Congress. But he said already is no stop for him, right? This is the problem, right? The problem, on the other hand, is that this is each month is money that the state has to pay for something, 1 of the 3 items per day or something like that, to attend thousands and thousands of people hacineted into the prisons, right? And that is money that they have to, the government has to do that, right? In that sense, this is a difficulty. But thirdly, there is a problem, because when he declared the war against the guns, is I will say, the most clear repetition of what was happening during the war in the 19th century, in the Civil War, when the army, now is the government, when the army decided to do against the guerrillas and attack and so on, put a lot thousands of soldiers and arms against what the guerrilla did was to move to another part. You see, and then they went there. Of course, they found people, and for instance, this famous case is that evangelical say we don't nothing the politics here, nothing the politics, and stay. When the guerrilla was telling them to fear, they come, that sort of thing. And they were killed, practically all of them, by the army, children, and so on. And still now, there is a trial about that. Okay. In that sense, then, the point is that we don't know, is the typical, what they call now, I don't like that, but it's used now in political discussion, is the Hydra war. No, it's not, because now they are repeating, the guerrilla moved to another place in the country. And then when the army has to go back because they have no more money for staying in, that is very expensive. This agreement of the army, right? Then when they become again to their own places that they control. This is something that is happening now. If Mr. Bukele wanted to continue to for solving the problem of the guns, using only the military, and each time more the military and not the police, and more the military, the one who decide how to do these things, and not the police. Well, when that is happening, this is happening, what a lot of the high level of the guns, what they did was to move out to Guatemala, to Honduras. And they are there. And they continue from there. And very few people. And this is something that you could say. The police, just to say, when he was asked, okay, right now, how many people are with the guns, right? And the police say between 60 and 80,000 people has more than the army and the police. Okay, that's what the police officially say. But now, the government already has put into jail 64, and more than 21 was already in jail because was captured. That means the guns already don't exist according to the number of the police. And that creates how the sort of tell the people, for instance, now El Salvador is recognized by the world that is the safer country. How can you say that? With your every day capturing 100, 200, 500 people and putting them because they are, you say that they are terrorists because they call the gangs terrorists, all of them. Those contradictions is clearly that appear when you start to study a little bit what they are doing and seeing. And in that sense, I would love to have this problem of the guns that is terrible in my country. No doubt about that. And make it impossible to live as thousands and thousands of Salvadorians, especially poor, with the rich people. Only are some of the higher level living in that colonies, groups of Kahas, living there, the higher. But the basis of the Mara, that are young people, more or less adults, yeah, those people have not a very good life in terms of something, and live always fighting among them and so and nasty things, and putting the problem into the people. I believe that we have, but we have to do it with the police, with the armed forces, maybe the armed forces, but the police, yes, because they are in charge of the order, and the gangs are against the order. Okay, this is bad. But the root of the gangs, if you don't change them, then again become more and more. And they have in our history. When they were the gangs were expelled from the United States, from California, without telling El Salvador that they were sending back criminals. Okay, and this is something that the United States did for the country, that country say that created a problem for us. Those people came to here, and what they have learned in the gangs in Los Angeles, for instance, for defending the Salvadorian from the other gangs, right? They started to come to create here first with sort of happy life, you know, drugs and so on, and living happy, you know, all right. But then started to extortion the people, started to kill more and more them, started to receive arms, some of them from the armed forces of El Salvador. Exactly the same that during the war, civil war, right? But in all those things started to grow. The only response that the government has is to say, those are terrorists. Let's put it in jail. There is no death penalty in El Salvador, you know, but for the life, and that sort of thing. That is necessary to solve the problem, of course. But only that do not solve the problem, and the first, the most clear for that is that this thing started with 200 or 300 people, and now the police is telling you that there are more than 80,000 people. Right? And on during all the period, the government, Arena and FMLN as well, and now Bukele has used the same arm. Let's capture and put it in jail. What happened is that they have to do more and more with more and more people, and the judiciary system collapsed. And now the system has collapsed. People that without audience started his process because he was captured during this period, you know, are more than 1 year. And in many of those cases, they only could eat if the family send not send the food, but brought a package of food and send it to the person. So this is our reality. That's why this has to change. But in the way that the government is doing, is just to produce certain security in certain areas. That is true now, because before they were the authority, and now those people have moved now, but they are not disappeared. They continue with different mode to do the whole thing with the question of extortion, not at the level as it was before. That was practical, unacceptable, impossible for the middle class and for the poor class especially. But now, in certain parts, continue with a difference, especially with the small place for that sells something very small. Those are the ones who continue to pay the extortion of the mass. Okay.
Well, I think we reached the end of our time, and in fact, we've gone over, and I really appreciate those who've been able to stay, and our students, our guests who asked questions. And thank you very, very much to Ambassador Zamora. Dr. Zamora is really one of the most insightful political analysts of what is going on in El Salvador today. He is obviously very, very focused on questions of democratic institutions, as well as the struggles of everyday people, everyday Salvadorans. And I really think if those of you who are in my class can take away one thing, it's that governments ultimately, they need to serve the people. And I think Dr. Zamora knows well from experience of when governments have worked well to serve the people, when they have not. And I think he brings a very important perspective of what is going on in the country today. So thank you very much, Dr. Zamora, for joining us. It's a real honor to have you speak directly to our university community.
And thank you very much for hearing me and having patience of what I talk too much. But
No, absolutely not.
I have to make in more than 60 years of doing fighting for the poor and for democracy, that they count. But sorry about that.
Well, thank you to everyone, and for those students who are preparing for their finals, good luck with that. Get in touch with me if you need any if you have any questions. And once again, many thanks to our guest, Dr. Zamora. It's been a real pleasure. Goodbye, everyone, and take care.